TheNBI.com. This is John. This reports for the 5th. Well, we had an interesting end of week there. We got that 50% move back into the breakout bar that previously talked about and did what? Hit exactly at our 408 algo level before getting bought back up. Still showing some softness there, but we're still magenta over yellow. Not a whole lot of activity happening from short activity, at least from the NBI weight. And even when we look at the DOC, we've just had a collapse of short-term buyers, crossover of signs, so some weakness, but contradicted by that rising gold and the shakeout being positive. So doing kind of what we would expect, soft medium range kind of pullback, just filling in. And from an NQ standpoint, same thing, just a little weaker from an NBI reading because we're below the 33 level, but almost identical from a DOC reading and then the shakeout with the rising gold. But it's a much less impressive shakeout configuration there for the NASDAQ. And that's just been some of the sporadic nature of the different moves going back and forth within NASDAQ related companies, given all of the upsets, China, Fed, the whole nine yards. It's quite a mess. Treasury TLT continuing to rise there, yields coming down. Gets into that quandary. I mean, I've always said it before. There was a limit to how far the Fed could actually go, because once you start seeing what it does to the budget deficits in that, it's going to be staggering. Um, but even so, they're so far behind the curve, they can't catch up to it. So what does that mean from an inflationary standpoint? Well, yeah, it's problematic as to how you end up getting through it. Um, there are just no good answers because all of the scenarios that you can play out, really, none of them end terrifically. But they mostly deal with credit. I mean, again, the world still operates. You're still going to need, bread in the mornings and coffee, those kinds of things, and they're still going to get produced. From an oil standpoint, the war on oil continues, but this is modest. And the interesting question really becomes the amount of demand and whether or not we see contractions. The labor numbers that have been, well, reported before, I mean, they just seem completely out of whack with what, the other surveys. But then again, with all the seasonal adjustments and creative alterations, it's hard to get any read from the reality of those. But the market pays attention, so we have to pay attention. And of course, within the readings, we see exactly how the market views it, and they think quantitative easing is coming back relatively soon, if that's possible. From a gold standpoint, gold is going to continue now to skyrocket as we expected. This is sort of that final catalyst that says, hey, they're not going to change anything, and you're just going to see continued erosion of currencies across all bases. I mean, that's where trying to pick a winner or loser out of that is a little more suspect, simply because they're all in a world of hurt. But from a euro standpoint, continuing to climb, and again, this was that action the Fed took a little while back in supporting the purchase of fossil fuels, net reducing the amount of demand needed, as well as this idea that somehow the eurozone is going to catch up to where the Fed is when it comes to interest rates, which they aren't. But again, these are those things that can play out short term. We don't care. We'll just go with what the readings are. From Bitcoin, still building back up, almost at the 50% now. Um, but as soon as that magenta fades, if white's still above it, could be problematic, though. Get some help there with the orange dip coming down, and just finally now getting to negative 14. So kind of purging that really deep kind of like sell distribution that took place and developing a slow ebb. More likely than not, they'll do a brief dip before sending it back up. And from a ETH standpoint, looking identical. So there's just a nice mirroring. You're not hearing as much, just the potential that there could be a more detailed investigation. Of course, there was my 50K, 5K, no data situation that always takes place over the weekend, which thank you for that. As always, though, as soon as I get something up, I'll put it on the Skype chat and we'll be able to go from there. But overall, I mean, we're seeing excellent ranges. It's just a question of lack of direction. And for that, we're just getting sideways. So we'll see that for a few more days until things start to flush out. Trade well. We'll talk to you later.